Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Female Gentle Leaders podcast. And today I'm here with Jessica Rice. She's a vision evolution coach, and we are here to talk about taking that big leap. And in any of our lives, it can mean whatever there is, maybe founding a company, maybe doing or finding another job, maybe doing something even at home, right, in our families, but just taking that step that feels really, really scary. And I think we can all relate to that. And a lot of us had to do the leap. I believe we all did leaps since we were children. We all did the leaps, we all survived it. But still, when there's the next one coming, it feels so frightening. So, Jessica, thank you for being here. And could you tell us more what you do as a vision evolution coach? I really love the title.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And of course, well, what you were just talking about, we all take that big leap. And as children, we're constantly taking that big leap. So when I was thinking about, evolution of who we are as a being, we are constantly evolving and shifting and changing. And we're learning from those experiences. And so when I'm working with leaders and women who are really looking to take that next leap of their evolution and where it is that they want to take their career, their lives. That's the type of stuff that I love working with people on and really helping them to hone what that is so it feels less like a risk and more like a planned execution of what it is that you're doing and really embracing that evolution of yourself when where you started out to even where you are right now and where you're headed.
I love what you said about making it less of a risk, because this is major. Sometimes when I heard like do the leap, just leave the work, I'm exaggerating a little bit, right? But still, I heard it. And trust, right?
Mhm.
Jump and the wings will open up. And it feels unrealistic, I think, for us women, mothers. We have so many things that and people leaning on to us that doing such a leap that is really risky
Mhm.
often isn't even smart, right? It,
Mhm.
it, it just like feels like, hey, no. So, um, what do you feel is that amazing moment when the client should come to you? Because it's hard to find that moment, right?
It's a really great question. I work with a lot of people who it can be at any, in different stages of their careers. A lot of people I work with, though, are, in executive leadership and privately, they're telling me that, they want to do something different. They want it to have meaning and purpose and value, and they're just struggling to know what that is. Or I think really the crux is they know deep inside, but they're afraid to kind of let that come out a little bit more. And I think that we become conditioned to either just stay in the kind of the rut that we're feeling in, or we don't want to speak out against the work that we're currently doing. When we're feeling that inside, this extra calling, or what I call our kind of higher calling, it's that little voice that's coming and it's repeatedly coming to us. And I think at that time is when you've been feeling it, that there's something else that you want to be doing. And it doesn't matter how much you stay in your career, what it is that you do, there might be even a subtle pivot that's required. But that's really a good time to start coming in and exploring, okay, what does this look like for you? What are the types of expertise, experience, knowledge base that you bring? And I emphasize a lot that our expertise and knowledge, it starts when we're young. It doesn't just start when we start going into school or getting our higher education. It doesn't start when we have our first corporate role or job or whatever that looks like. It starts throughout our lives, and it teaches us things and how we behave, how we show up in the world. and everything that we bring to it. So when we're talking about like Gay Hendricks' zone of genius or something along those lines, it's innately a part of us and we don't always recognize it. And so I think that's a fun place to come and start teasing that apart so that you can then start the actual planning. So it's not really about just, I have a dream and so I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go off. And that can happen, but it is risky. And if you have responsibilities like many of us do, it's just not practical. And so I try to work with clients to find practical approaches to following a different path that might lead to greater alignment with what it is that they truly feel that they want to do.
It sounds so amazing. And yeah, I can even remember that slight voice, right? At first, you can ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
You can shush it. After a few weeks, maybe months, it starts being louder. Then even for me, my body had to start crumbling, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment for me, like, okay, I slipped again. I
Mm-hmm.
ignored that voice. I did more of something I wasn't supposed to do, and I need to change. But it's so nice when we listen to that voice and react upon it before the body needs to take
Mm-hmm.
and do stuff against us, right? And this is what I wanted to ask you because I believe there is your story underneath it. Could you tell us more about how you become this amazing vision evolution coach?
There's quite a bit of story, but I will say, I think, for me, it was bringing forth pieces of my life, pieces of myself that I wasn't utilizing to a greater extent. I had gone through periods where my body did fail me when I was younger, and that was stress induced and other, trauma that had occurred in my life. And once I started going into corporate and really moving up in corporate, I started to feel within me that calling and that shift. And it was manifesting in interesting ways within my life at that time, too. Within my marriage, I was traveling more. I had a 3-year-old son. And I really sought out coaching. Specifically at that time, it was spiritual coaching to help me through my marriage because we were pending divorce and I really didn't know what to do next. I wanted to keep growing and be successful, but there was a conflict that was starting to happen within our lives. And what I hadn't realized was it was the work that I was doing itself. It was actually out of alignment for me because I was supposed to be doing something else. I would have an engineering background, and so I was working as a software developer, moving up as a software developer, a leader, manager, director of engineering. And my first calling wasn't that. I actually came back from an art background and design background and very creative background and just fell into this work out of it was like a means of necessity, trying to earn extra income. And it really wasn't in my heart wasn't in it. My passion wasn't in it. And I think it was manifesting in various ways where I was experiencing deep-seated anger and frustration. And it was coming out, in my home life. And I didn't know how to grapple with some of that frustration and then getting burnt out and stressed out because you're working long hours towards something that when you don't love it, it starts to become very apparent to you and your body is calling out to you and telling you that there might be something else to consider. What I do love now with coaching, as I moved into that, because as I started to recognize like this actually brings every piece of myself into fruition, into being. And when I work with other engineering leaders, I'm able to leverage those skills, but I'm also able to leverage the creative aspects of myself, the aspects of myself that are interested in neuroscience and psychology and all of the other pieces that I just wasn't utilizing in that one career. So I was able to pivot and adapt and really start thinking about how to carve out a change in my life.
That's incredible. And you saw, sometimes this happens, sometimes children come. So I'm glad I was muted and I'm glad I could still listen to you. Um, what I like about us sharing our stories is the fact that we can really learn from each other, right? We can learn and even see each other in those little pieces of the story. And then when somebody will listen to us here, somebody can say, wow, I'm just living in it. I'm not feeling excited about what I do, and I'm still forcing myself to do it. And yes, I think it's a conditioning that says you can't leave something you're doing.
Mhm.
You have responsibilities, right? Whatever there is behind that. And I don't know how about you, but I learned since I was a child, ignore what your body says and go to school, right?
Mhm.
Have a headache, take a pill and go to school.
Mhm.
Go, you have exams. Force your body in whatever way so you fulfill that responsibility, that task ahead, right? So it's so strongly in us. What do you think that helped you go out of this cycle?
I mean, I think that's a really key point that you're bringing up is the lack of honoring ourselves, honoring our body, and really conditioning our mind to ignore the important pieces of ourselves. And I think that can stem very deeply. It manifested for me in different ways too, with being involved with wrong relationships, things of those nature, where you start ignoring, not my marriage, something previous, just to clarify. But we start ignoring to a certain degree ourselves. And I think that when we start wanting to make a shift or change, we absolutely can, but it starts by focusing inward on looking at those core needs and what's not being met. And once we can start meeting even some of those core needs and really sitting with ourselves, I think that's another thing that we struggle with sometimes is really just being with ourselves. We have a lot of distractions that are out there in the world, and we use them in a way to distract our mind, and not just from, I think the kind of the lies to a certain extent is that we're distracting ourselves from the work or the job or the life. But what we're really doing is distracting from ourselves, from really sitting with the uncomfortableness that we've created within our lives. And then being able to take a shift and look at those ugly parts as well as look at the beautiful parts, because it's all together. There's I can't remember the quote, but essentially, we are this kind of woven tapestry, and on the front is the picture, and on the back is all the messy string and yarn that shows up in our lives. And when we can start to kind of embrace those different sides of ourselves, then we can start doing some of the work that focuses more on what it is that we want to change, what it is that we want to see ourselves growing in, what it is that we want to create and cultivate in our lives that will bring more meaning and purpose and value. And I think that sometimes we focus a lot on the monetary aspects, and that also creates this gap or chasm into what is the work that we really want to be doing. When we figure that out, I think then the rest starts to fall into place. But it's not until then. And so we're chasing the wrong kind of dreams, so to speak, because they're not inherent within us. And in terms of conditioning, our mind absolutely does pay attention to these things, based on neuroscience. If we want to go on that side of the conversation, we are negatively triggered. We have a negativity bias that takes into account all of the things that are happening in our life, and it starts to build up and we start to become conditioned towards those things. But there are pieces of our brain too, right here above our kind of eyebrow, that focuses on the fun aspects of our lives as well. And so, as it was explained to me, it's kind of like with children and vegetables versus, say, ice cream or chocolate. You know, It's harder sometimes to get them to eat the vegetables because in this part of our brain, it's saying, well, how fun was this on the scale of, whatever the scale is. And if it's not as fun, it's asking, do we want to do that again? And so if we've put ourselves into a position where, maybe even we reached out or we tried to do something and it didn't succeed, we didn't feel like we succeeded, then we're automatically telling ourselves like, oh, we shouldn't try that again. And that's where we're being risk averse can start coming into play. What we really need to do is take that step back and really examine and ask, is it true? And is it just a matter of changing the way that we approached it or pivoting and being flexible enough to consider different solutions, different outcomes? Because our brain is thinking about, what has been, not what's coming, not what's in the future, because it can only base it what's happened in the past. And that's where I look at negative experiences too. And I always try to find the positive in the things that have occurred within my own life so that I can learn from it. And I can also see how I shifted and how I grew and became the person that I am today from that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answered.
I think the proofs that we can find in our own lives can really help us. And it changes the perspective, right? That first perspective is always that bad one, right? It will work. There isn't even money in this like type of job, right? It's like these first things come. But when we already need the change and feel the change, what you see, what often helps, what do you think, or not think, but what could you say are your favorite tips to even start to think about that change being possible?
So I do ask clients when they're thinking about making a shift is to start listing out different qualities about themselves, to list out the things that they're good at, and really also to remove judgment of themselves. There's a lot of work I do around saboteurs and the things, those inner thoughts that can come up and sabotage us from succeeding, and they can appear in a variety of ways, whether it's from being hypervigilant or a pleaser or a stickler. There's different types of saboteurs. But if we can start removing from judgment and really just listing out what are things that I'm really good at, what are things that I really enjoy, what are areas of expertise that I carry, I think it really can help us to honor and explore what it is that we first bring, because a lot of it comes from a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-value, and a lack of self-trust. We don't trust ourselves enough. We don't believe in ourselves enough. We don't reward essentially ourselves and what it is that we bring to the table. So I think it really starts there in honoring who we are as individuals. I think it's really challenging to do this work because you're having to look at the good parts. I think we are, like you mentioned earlier, as children, we're somewhat conditioned to ignore those things or to be humble. And I think humility, there's a place for humility, but we go so far as to completely discount the values that we bring, or at least some of us. And when we're wanting to make some sort of a leap or a change in our lives, we have to start first by recognizing who we are and what it is that we do bring to the world authentically, who we as an individual are, what our unique gifts and talents are. And it starts very simply with what it is that we love. I know there's a Japanese way of looking at this with Ikigai, which is very similar to that. And so when we can honor ourselves, then we can start paving out extrapolating, okay, but what in there is it that I really enjoy? What in there is a calling for me or a passion for me? I think what happens when I work with creatives a lot is, I love painting, I love art, I love creating things, but I don't know how to make any money doing it. I don't know how to turn it into a business. I don't know how to take a leap from corporate to becoming a painter. And so in there is where we start doing the weaving of, okay, well, what does this really look like? how do you want this to kind of manifest for yourself? And why is this so much of a calling for you? Why is it speaking to you so much? And so I think there's a lot nested under the surface and the layers of everything, but it really does begin with thinking about what it is that you first bring, and not from a place of critique or comparison. Just what do you bring?
And I loved how you said that the other part is believing in ourselves. And I even feel that at the beginning, you said that it's amazing when we follow and do what we love, right? And in believing that I can do what I love and make money, that's the most amazing thing. But that's maybe the hardest, right? As you said, from corporate to painting, that sounds quite scary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Since we were children again, right? Artists don't make money. And it's not true, right? It's not true, but it's so deeply engraved that here you work and it doesn't matter if it's fun, you just earn the money. And on the other hand, you can have fun, right? You can paint, do whatever you want as a hobby and not as a work. So what can help us to realize that we can really be artists when if it's our calling, right?
So I think that it really comes down to how we approach it. Number one, I never really advocate for just leaving or walking away from your corporate existence right away. It's really about building up in tandem. I think that's true for pretty much anything that you decide that you're going to embark on. It's not one and then the other. It's how do you make your kind of scaffolding? How do you make these things fit within your life so that at some point there's a tipping and then you move into the thing that you're enjoying. So going from, say, corporate to an artist, it's really about how are you building up yourself as an artist, and what other type of expression are you creating? Oftentimes with artists, it's not just the painting in it of itself, it's also the community that you're getting involved with. It's the connections that you're making, how you are, building essentially your personal brand as an artist within, the larger sets of community, whether that starts out small or starts to expand online. So there we start thinking about, okay, really strategy. Are you going to start providing workshops for other people who are interested? There's a lot of different types of art. There's trauma-informed art. There's expressive types of art. And so getting creative in those aspects of, where is it that you can take your art? I think sometimes we just think finite about the thing, like I want to paint. And we don't put into effect how do we make this happen? How do we turn it into something that is a living for ourselves? Even authors, any creative person, it's not just writing books. There's the selling of the books, there's workshops that happen, there's other things that are going on to help turn it into an actual business. But I think the beginning thing it's really important to understand is that you're scaffolding this in tandem, and you're finding ways to make it work in both aspects of your life. And I used to be a firm believer, especially before I had children, that I never had enough time. I never had enough time to do these things. I was too busy. And I think we get really wrapped up and even proud sometimes of how busy we are. But we're just not allocating our time efficiently. And if we start really becoming warriors of our time, we can start finding the time, finding ways to make these things happen for ourselves. When I was exiting corporate, I was homeschooling my son. I'd gone through having multiple certifications. I already started coaching corporate clients, big clients at that time. And it was just really a matter of finding for me, okay, this is the tipping point. And once I reached that, I didn't know always like fully like how or when, but it just became apparent to me because I'd already built up enough where I could walk away from this. And then this was what I was doing now full time.
Thank you for that example, because we said at the beginning that you always take care of the fact that it's not risky to make the big leap. So it's great that we could make a few examples of how it could look like. And I totally agree. I don't think that we talk enough about, exactly as you said, scaffolding, doing both things at once at first, just having even fun, right, with that new thing, and finding the ways that it can grow, expand, and then the time will come always, right? It comes the time when you will choose, but it doesn't have to be right now in the moment when you're not feeling happy, right? It's just the start. So I'm really happy that you can be there for each and every one of us at that point in time and space, right? To create that shift, create that change, help people do that leap. And before we end this talk, is there something you want to add? Is there something you feel like needs to be said?
So what was coming forth for me as I was saying that too, I feel like, is sometimes we are really keen on giving up before we've really truly begun, because we start to think maybe this is too hard, or it's too much effort, or it's not possible. We have a lot of negative self-talk. What I do want to say is that, and this was true for me, is that when you find that passion and you actually do start pursuing it, and I've seen this time and time again with clients, that is actually what carries you through. It carries you through the work that you're doing, the crappy work that you don't want to do. And I hate to say it in such a way, but sometimes it's true, right? Some of us are working in incredibly toxic environments. And if you're wondering like, oh my God, I can't even imagine staying here any longer. So you maybe you're on the precipice of like, I want to take the big leap, but I don't know if I can, but I hate this. And you're really just feeling that conflict inside of you. When you start working on this passion and you start pursuing this, that's the light. That is the light for you at that end of the tunnel. That's what you're chasing. And that's what it was for me. It's what gave me the stamina to keep pushing forward. It's what gave me the hope. It's what got me through the rough days in work where I was working extra hours. I had last minute deadlines. They interrupted, my life. And it was a challenge. And if I didn't have those things, I wouldn't have had any hope. I wouldn't have felt like, okay, it's okay for right now, because I know that I'm moving in this direction already. I am laying a path for myself. And that's I think, a key and important thing to really recognize and understand. There's a client right now who I'm watching this unfolding for them, who was really struggling in tears and upset and crying about their work, and happens to be an artist. And once they started moving in this direction, starting to take courses, just to revitalize that part of their being, it's amazing the shift in happiness and the less focus, the lack of focus on the job and the crap that was happening there, and more focus on the positive and what's happening, the good things that are happening in her life now. So if you feel like it's not possible or there's no belief, those are the things that actually carry you through to making that big leap. It is your lifeline. And so if you can look at it from a different perspective, I think it really helps to shift and reframe what it is that we're thinking for ourselves.
Thank you for that. And yes, we need to remind ourselves every day, where we focus, there it grows, right? So let's focus on that, on anything that makes us feel good, right? That we love. And it will grow. Thank you, Jessica, for being here. And it's been an honor. I'm glad we could talk about everything around the leaves. And yes, For all of you, I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. And don't forget to follow for more. Have an amazing day.
Thank you.